Now the best thing you can do for any display saltwater aquarium is have a quarantine tank. A quarantine tank can be very basic. It can just be a tank with a sponge filter and a heater, and then you can observe the fish in that environment for a period of weeks before putting them into your main tank. It also means you can play around with things like hypersalinity, various medications and so forth in the safe environment of a quarantine tank, and not have to risk and mess with your main display. Now, if you are dosing copper in your quarantine, then you've just got to be aware that any calcium carbonate substrates, rocks or anything will absorb the copper. So you want to dose the copper, and do not assume there's copper in the water, because it will all bond out of solution. So dose the copper, then test the copper, then later on dose the copper, then test the copper, then later on dose the copper, and then test the copper, until eventually there's copper in the water, because it will bond and go out of solution. Now it's the opposite for when you need to get the copper out. So when you want to get the copper out, water changes and products like polyfilter are your friend, because the polyfilter is going to suck the copper out of the water. Then over time the copper will leach back into the environment out of the rock. Then it will slowly leach out and slowly leach out and slowly leach out until it ends up being harmless. The polyfilter will change color to tell you that it's removing the copper, and then when the polyfilter is black, you chuck it out and replace it. And then over a long time, eventually the copper will leach its way all the way out. So you just need to be aware when dosing your tank with copper that it's going to take a long time until the copper gives a positive reading, and just be aware that when you want to get the copper out of the system, it's going to take a while. So anyway, if you've got any tips on this particular subject, then put a little note on the bottom of this video, and don't forget to subscribe.